Welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Today joining me is Dr. Kfoury from River Educational Consulting. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's always good to be here. Hope you're doing well.
Sure. Yeah, today I want to briefly look at things from both locally and internationally, but it's kids in general. What is keep pushing them to be so murderous? Apparently, since 2017 up to 2022, murders among teens has skyrocketed. You got ideas what is really contributing to that?
To that factor that's rising?
Yeah, that driving, because I mean, I don't know. The world is moving so expeditiously these days, is that even the adult's head is somewhat confused, and I'm wondering if the youth today can actually handle what the world is throwing at them that will cause them to be depressed, confused, not being able to make the rational decisions to do things, and therefore resorting to murder and suicide and so forth.
Well, I definitely think it's a very complex and very compound, evaluation of the situation. I do believe that you are correct in saying that there's a lot being thrown at children at top speed, and there's not a lot of ability to process in the same way that we would expect adults to process. So, I would agree with you in that section of your thinking. I do believe that it is so profound, so much more profound than able to answer in a few sentences. But
right.
The inability of being able to process emotions in the way that may be needed to assess and fully address and almost regulate emotions of the individuals, so they don't have that urge, desire, capability, or even just lack of control of their actions to engage in behaviors that are negative and harmful. I think they don't. I think unfortunately we are aware that we need to have strategies and methods and processes that calm a child's emotional regulation down, like their processes and thinking and being able to breathe through it and regulate their emotions and talk it through. The problem is that because we're so go, which is like what you and I have just spoken about,
right,
that I don't think we take the time to really fully address all that they need to go through in order to regulate their emotions. So they basically just engage in whatever is immediate behavior. So some makes, rash decisions, split decisions, and they don't think the consequences through, and they don't regulate their emotions, so that it's almost like just an act of passion, an act of rage, an act of lack of control. And their brain isn't formulated enough. It's not developed enough. It's not built enough. There's not enough control factor where they understand the full ramifications of their actions, their words, and they can't comprehend that they could have had it a different way, that they could have done something different, that they could have engaged or behaved in a certain way other than what they actually did. And that goes for as far as acts of aggression, acts of homicide, acts of engaging in suicidal ideation or suicidal acts. It also in regards to drugs and the availability of drugs and the alcohol, and even addiction now is becoming even higher as far as gambling, as far as alcohol, drugs, etc. And I just don't know if, because we're so go, we do not have the tools and we don't slow down to help the individuals have the tools. There's so many levels that are not being met, which has in essence led to that rise of statistics that you were talking about.
Yeah. I often wonder what the next generation of kids would be like. And I'm speaking of from a global standpoint. The world somewhat is traumatized, especially the younger generation. We have young kids in places like Ukraine, we have them in the Palestinian region, who are bombarded by war, whereas you have kids here in America who are entitled to the best schooling and everything's to their fingertips. And, you know, where one is lacking in knowledge, the other is trying to survive, is trying to survive. And I'm wondering if there is a general word that we can speak on today that can bring some form of hope to these kids who are experiencing international trauma through wars. It's nothing they brought upon themselves. They were ambitious kids in school who were looking to really elevate themselves and who would have had dreams of professions and so forth. And I think they're looking for a comforting word despite of what tragic moments they are experiencing, how they can rebound from it. And, you know, they're going to be looking out to professionals, counselors, and even though they may be traumatized themselves, how they can get back to that place of studying without being traumatized of the after effects with experiencing wars and so forth. I mean, you probably never experienced this yourself. And is there a word that you can say to those of Ukraine? And I'm saying this simply because videos can travel any place now at any given time, like lightning fast. And is there a confident word that you can speak to kids who are experiencing these bad moments in their lives and probably giving up on life right now?
Well, it actually is kind of, I'm actually going to flip that question in and of itself. The children who are right now currently experiencing the turmoil in Ukraine, the turmoil in Israel, Lebanon, and other parts of the world that we're just not even hearing about, right. They're actually not thinking of what we're talking about right now. They're actually just in survival mode. So they, in and of themselves, their brain isn't really working in the same way that we would have our brains working. So right now, they're just looking for where they can get the next meal, where they can get water, how they can help their family. And yes, they are angry and they're frustrated and rightfully so, and they're scared and they have all of those emotions. But right now, they're living in a time of crisis. So it's not, they're not thinking in the same way that the child who's over here that has stressors in the same fashion of a war torn country, right? So I guess my thought on that whole entire question is also what we have to do is once they are in a safer environment, once they have a food, shelter, all of Maslow's law hierarchy with all the foundational needs, what do we do to address the trauma as they're coming out of it, right? After they're no longer living in survivor mode after many months, how do we address the panic that they're going to feel or the anxiety? How do we address the PTSD? So that, that is how we actually have to think about the situations, like I said, in Israel and in the Gaza Strip, in Ukraine, and other parts, right? But for those that are in the in the United States, that like right now, and the children who are thinking of giving up, or they're thinking of, this isn't worth it, or that's a different set of situations. And I always say, we need you here. We want you to stay. The way that you're perceiving life is most likely not the reality. So how do we get you to see the reality of the need for you to continue existing on this planet, and the fact that you are going to contribute so much to this planet as you are on it, right? So that's the approach that I would take for an individual who is not in a war-torn country. I think the countries, it's basically first we need to meet the needs of food, shelter, safety, and that in and of itself will start the healing process for them.
Absolutely. And I only say that and take it from this comparison analysis because the reality is is that generation who's going to propel the nation forward. And the reality is that the privileged kids who are here should be exposed to, and I'm saying we should put that before them and so forth, but they should have a clear understanding that their children far worse off than them. The nation has to go forward. How would that nation look 10, 20 years down the road from now, opposed to here in the United States looking 10, 20 years down the road, if everyone is going to come up with a depressed mind, a mind of turmoil and conflict, just grew up in a nation of violence, whether it's through leadership or any form, what nations would we then be promoting for future generations to come? And I say that because I think all training should stem from the homes. And I think right here, I want to come right back here now to the US, is that we find that the parenting today is far, far from reality. You can't even tell the kids' behavior nowadays from the parents' behavior. And I said that to simply say this, that the same very things the parents are involved in, so is the children, because of whether it's through modernized technology or whatever the case may be. And if you're asking me, the kids are more outperforming the parents in this time of season, so how could then the parents really give their children advice when the children are now becoming smarter than the said very parents? I'm looking at the indoctrination of maintaining excellence within your nation without being contaminated with whether it's technology or violence in the schools or whatever the case may be, how we can preserve the youthful mind to think youthful and think futuristic in achieving goals that is profitable for everyone and building a stronger nation for tomorrow. I mean, that's a mouthful, though.
It definitely is a mouthful. Good for you. I think, I think we have to look at it. So to me, I just separated that question into two parts. The first one was, about coming out of these countries that have seen war and seen devastation and tragedy. And I think we have to just have faith in the human nature, because we've already seen that. We've seen that in World War I, we've seen it in World War II, and we've seen it absolutely span the globe and affect so many other countries in different continents. So I think we just have to have faith and that humankind is resilient. I think it does change the cultures and compassion natures of individuals, but I still think deep down inside we're resilient. We figure it out. There might be an increase, like after World War I, in nationalism for each and every country. So the national pride, how that plays out in politics, we'll have to see. But that's, again, what the United Nations original mission was, right? To control what's going on in the world and make sure that there's peaceful environments. That's my hope. I hope that, unfortunately, with the use of increased technology and the fact of AI becoming more and more advanced, I do fear wrong messages get released and they're not valid. They're falsified. That is a concern. But I think overall, children they're more apt to play with the technology and not be afraid of making mistakes. Whereas you and I are afraid of typing on the computer and that we mess up and we don't know how to go back and fix it. We're afraid we're going to shut our whole computer down. Whereas I feel like the younger generations, they don't care if they destroy something. They try to figure it out and they rebuild on it. They're less afraid, and we are more afraid of making mistakes with technology. I think I think as the more technology that comes, the more that the generations below us still have a lack of fear in many aspects, and they try and try and try. So I'm not so worried about future generations not being able to still be children, but I also think they'll always have those traits of trial and error and not having fear. And I do wish that a lot more kids were going outside without schedules, because I feel like having two teenage girls myself, I don't really see a lot of free play, and I don't really see a lot of free time where you just have my 17-year-old doesn't just have a friend come drive by, pick her up, and they go to the mall or they go to a park or whatever. I don't see a lot of that, and I'm really hoping we go backwards and do a lot more of that, because I think so much structured time creates anxiety and frustration, and then combine that, with technology and more technology and more social media. I do worry about a lot of their future patterns, I guess. Okay. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, I think we got a long way. I want to switch the subject a little, not to really go from what we were talking about, but it concerns me a lot pertaining to the nationwide ban on the ability for young ladies, well, let me say look at Planned Parenthood, for example. I'm not specifically speaking about abortion, because I am pro-life and I believe in the preservation of life. But I think Planned Parenthood is more than just having young kids terminate a pregnancy, but for their reproductive system, biological system, who may need to be treated in some way or the other. And now that is outlawed, and the person who would have caused it to be outlawed now want to reshape his mouth and say that he leave it up to every state to make their own choices, just because they may want to win an election. Now, I've heard of circumstances where women were pregnant and that infant and some of them were teenagers, by the way, who would have experienced threats by having that child inside there. And if not to remove the child, is a good likelihood that both mom and child would have died. And there are times where the babies would have actually died within the woman, and she'd need to have to terminate the pregnancy to avoid septic and to avoid any form of contamination that could further take her life. All these kind of things. Now, with that said, it will call for schools and parents to be super cautious now in teaching their children how to refrain from sex at an early age, and nature doesn't permit that. It doesn't matter how much mom and the dad try to train their kids to do the right thing, they're still going to do what they want and what the natural nature of them called for them to do.
Right.
Do you think for this time in season alone that can have a very negative psychological impact, especially on young women? Not so much the young boys, but the young women.
What impact are you talking about with being?
Well, psychologically, I mean, if a girl fool around for a guy, or even get raped for a matter, for that reason, and she becomes pregnant, she has to carry the baby. Just try to imagine you carrying a child that you never wanted in the first place because of a rape. And that could go for a teenager as well as an adult. Or she was fooling around with a boy at school and hormones get out of order and they both had sex. These are things you can't prohibit. It doesn't matter when that time comes. Different heads think. What kind of psychological impact that can actually have on a child who have a crush on each other in school? And I don't know. What you think? I
had both my children by IVF. I had a very hard time having children. So I adore the pro, I am pro-choice in the same way, but I am only pro-life for myself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm both. I'm somewhat both.
Right.
Because,
So I always feel that it's never my ability as a normal human being, as an everyday person, to be able to inflict my opinions and my thoughts and my judgment upon others, right? I share my thoughts, but you can take it or you can leave it. In regards to being a female that encounters trauma such as rape or encounters trauma such as incest or other family concerns, or just even, I have not, had a patient that was, or client that was pregnant as a teen, but I did have friends who did. And I think the fact of them having that choice really does alter the situation in general. I think it's a very personal decision. I think that if you are forced, like in southern states of our nation right now, to have a child in circumstances that are harmful, such as threat to their own lives, threat to the baby's lives, that there's an unhealthy fetus, but yet you're forced to carry that unhealthy fetus to childbirth. If it's rape, it's incest, or just the other circumstances that might occur, I think it does do a lifetime of psychological impact in not a positive way. Whether or not, I do understand the argument of once you see this baby, you're going to be so happy, you're going to love this child. That doesn't always happen. And that should not be expected of us who are not living in that person's shoes, right? That's, again, it comes to where I'm a pro-life person. And if I ever gotten pregnant, and I would have that child, but I am not. I am pro-choice for everybody else. I do believe that it is psychologically harmful to force an individual to have another human being if they are not ready or willing or capable of being emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically, and financially ready in any sort of capacity. But again, that is my opinion for life and for individuals around. I do think it does a long-term damage. And I don't know if there's not enough case study to support, and there's not enough evidence purposely done so to not study the impact of mothers giving birth to children that they have not wanted or were able to have, or what it did to their lives because they were not allowed to have an abortion or not support it in a safe medical environment. And that now they have children that might have disabilities that are life threatening. And so now you have circumstances that are not supportive of healthy lifestyles. I guess I'm trying to say it in a very nice way of, I just, it is a lot for a lot of people that that are not able to have that ability to have a child that might have a disability or might have physical complications, and they might not be ideal. And then I'd like to stick to always choice for others. Yeah.
Absolutely. And on that reason, I don't even believe that government should even have a say as to what a woman should be able to do with her body. That's her body. Her choice to terminate a child or to carry a child is strictly between she and her creator. Only she and only herself can answer to her creator why she do such a thing. And I think that is stepping on the rights of a woman to do what she wants to do. And she should have a right to self-determination. I mean, if you go to a nursing home, the residents, they have a right, whether they're Alzheimer's or have some form of dementia, they have a right to make their own decisions if they want to take medication, not to take medication. That's a right. And I think the same thing should go for the rights of women. As I said, I am pro-life, more lean towards pro-life, but I'm still pro-choice, that I respect every woman's decision what she do, because psychologically it has an impact on her life throughout her lifetime. And if she just doesn't want it, well, that's totally up to her. But government should have a say, or even removing any form of privileges for a woman to do what is right according to her feelings. But we coming up in the last 2 minutes. Any general advice or concerns you would have for the youth out there that would refreshing their memories to take them to a different level?
That's a great question. I do encourage anybody who is of voting age to make sure that you take the time to register and you vote. This election is going to be a pretty intense one.
Yes.
I do also urge, with that same notion, knowing that this election is going to be intense, is that we need to recognize that politics is only one facet of our lives, right? It does not define us completely. It does not. And I know a lot of people say, well, if this is their thought process, XYZ. But we need to learn to disconnect, and we need to learn that religion is a part, culture is a part, living situations are a part, preferences are a part, not just politics. So yes, go and register to vote so you can have your voice heard. I think it's very important for especially our young females, because of exactly what we're talking about right now. We need to recognize that women should have a say. Women say that they, it is said in our country that women do have a voice. We just don't seem to have the final voice for final female concerns. So we need to make sure that our voice is heard this election. And then also too, if you are struggling, I want you to reach out to a loved one, reach out to a teacher, reach out to a principal, reach out to a guidance counselor, reach out to your friends, and have your friends reach out for you if you're not capable of doing that. But if you are struggling and you need help, if you feel not comfortable, if you feel a little off, make sure you're telling somebody, because we care about you and we want your life to continue. And do not enter those challenges that are on TikTok or Instagram that harm yourself or your lives.
Beautiful. Well, on that note, said Dr. Tara Kfoury, it was a pleasure having you on. And you can reach out to Doctor anytime. And she's on River Consulting, Educational Consulting, .com. She's always a pleasure. Great advice, great encouragement. With that, have a nice day.
You too.
And to all those who have been tuning in on Living in the 21st Century, have a great day.